Elisha and Elijah were two Old Testament prophets, strange and mysterious men who strode the stage of the northern part of Israel during the 9th century BC. They railed against corruption and decadence. They pleaded with the people and the kings of the day not to abandon God. They were able to anoint who would be king, but then as soon as they were made king, they would usually have something critical to say about them. Elijah is said to have called down fire from heaven on the prophets of Baal, Baal was a pagan god. And at the end of Elijah's life, he's said to have ascended to heaven on a chariot of fire. That's where that term chariots of fire comes from. Elisha performed many miracles of healing when he took over from Elijah as prophet. And these two giants of Hebrew scripture are very much in the background of our gospel reading today. You can basically take all the verses of today's gospel reading and put parallel pieces from the stories of Elijah and Elisha beside them. So for Jesus' listeners, for Luke's listeners, or for people listening to Jesus at the time, they would have known that story. Many of the people of Jesus' time thought of Jesus also like a giant of the prophets. They thought he was a hero, a miracle worker, someone who stood up to the religious leaders of the day, someone who made them feel strong, someone who inspired them. And people often asked Jesus, "Are you Elijah?" Elijah the prophet was supposed to return before the Messiah came. So people would ask Jesus, "Are you Elijah?" But Jesus wasn't interested in that kind of hero worship. He wasn't interested in people following him for all the hype and the excitement. At the beginning of our gospel passage for today, Jesus and the disciples are in Samaria. Now, Jews and the people from Samaria, Samaritans, were pretty hostile to each other, so it's no surprise that the Samaritan village he wants to go to does not welcome him. That would be perfectly normal for that time. But James and John, wanting to be heroes, suggest that perhaps they could rain down fire on the people. Maybe they just want to be like Elijah. James and John, the wannabe prophets. Now that puts Jesus in a pretty grumpy mood. His followers just don't get it. They want to be heroes without the hard work, and they want him to be a hero. So he puts them in their place. He rebukes them, we are told. Then a poor innocent soul comes alongside Jesus as he walks and says, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus does not give any words of welcome or encouragement. Rather, he says, "Foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but I have nowhere to lay my head." It's quite a sad and lonely Jesus that comes through there. I've got nowhere to call my own. I've got no home to retreat to. And he implies that anyone who wants to follow him better get real, that that's how their life is going to be as well. They will always be on the road, always seeking new people, new places to hear the message, never really having anywhere to lay his or her head. He says, following me is about your whole life, the way you live, the way you think, the way you pray, the choices you make. It's not just about kind of thinking, oh, it's going to be great, I'm going to follow you, yay, I'm a groupie. It's not like that. One of my favourite theologians, David Lose, says of this passage, does Jesus make a noticeable difference in our lives? Does the grace, mercy and love of God made incarnate in Jesus trump our plans and shape our lives? Or do we shape our faith to fit the lives that we've already planned? Do we shape our faith to fit the lives that we've already planned? David Lose doesn't mean that oversimplified idea that God has a plan for our lives, but he is asking, does our faith mould our lives? Are there choices we make and things we do differently because we are people of faith? Or do we shape our faith to fit the lives we've already planned? Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be hearing from fellow parishioners in the Telling Our Stories series. They're going to share something of their life story and share with us that very question: how has faith shaped their lives and their choices? Sometimes faith can seem gentle and supportive. Other times faith can be like Jesus of today's account, harsh and in your face. They're going to help us ask the question, what does it mean for each of us to be a follower of Jesus? As we listen to their stories, we're going to be encouraged to reflect on our own stories. But back with those first followers of Jesus, as we continue through the gospel story, another poor soul says he wants to follow Jesus, but wants to bury his father first. A reasonable request, one might think. But Jesus says, rather callously, let the dead bury the dead. Seize the moment. There is no time to lose. Life is here. Life is now. And then a final person echoes the Elisha story we heard this morning. He says, let me first say goodbye to my loved ones. Elisha is permitted to do that by Elijah. He goes back and he cooks the oxen and feeds the people and kisses his family goodbye, then goes to follow Elijah. But Jesus says, no, even the great prophet Elisha is not a model here. Do not look back. Pretty tough words for us. So let's listen over the next few weeks to see how our fellow pilgrims in faith look at how faith shapes their lives in the tough moments and in the good moments. They're not going to be speaking to us as experts, but as followers on the road, just like you and me. And as we listen to them in our readings over the next few weeks, we will continue to accompany Jesus through the eyes of the gospel writer Luke. We'll be hearing about the Samaritans again, with the famous parable of the Good Samaritan appearing in 2 weeks' time. We'll see the disciples, Mary and Martha, argue about whether it's better to serve Jesus or whether it's better to sit at his feet and listen. There will be encouragement, as usual, to give up our possessions, and there will be stories of healing and stories of the lost being found. All of these readings in the season of ordinary time that we've just started into are there to form us as followers of Jesus. We follow along with the followers of Jesus and in Luke's gospel, watching them, listening to them, and we're invited to follow in similar fashion. But also in the next few weeks, we're going to be doing some work together on our parish review that was outlined to us last week by Archdeacon Sarah Moss. She explained the process of the survey and the workshops that we're going to do. We have an opportunity here to take stock and ask each other, how are we doing as a community of faith? How well are we supporting each other to be followers of Jesus? Are we doing a good job of supporting each other? And then what are we doing collectively to live out our faith? What are we doing to help each other in our individual lives? And then what are we doing as a community? Does our worship empower us for God's ministry in the world? Then when we've had a chance to reflect on the surveys and to reflect on our answers, we're going to look at what we want to focus our energies on in the next few years. What is it as a faith community that is our next priority? What do we seek in our future together? What might we need to let go of in order to do that? Where are we heading? And while we're doing that, we also have quite a few other programs coming up. Your What's Happening lists them all. We've got a workshop on anti-discrimination, one on climate change. We've got some evening sessions with our resident theologians, Susan and John. And of course, we've got music and concerts galore. There's lots to choose from in this season of ordinary time. We don't expect you to do everything, but we hope that you will find something that will stretch and challenge you. Because Jesus lays out a challenge to us today. He says, this is who I am, follow me or not. Take it or leave it. You don't get to be heroes and call down fire on your enemies. Instead, though, don't look back, move forward, walk in faith, and let faith shape your life.